Okay, next up is document C on page 59 of your Mini-Q. And if you look at the source of document C, it is adapted from the General History of Virginia. You'll notice the spelling here is different from what we're used to seeing today. This would have been the way the word general and history would have been spelled by John Smith. The book here is the General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles, Book 3 by Captain John Smith, written in 1624. So this chart, or this document that we're going to look at, which includes the first and second Jamestown ship lists, to include the occupation of all of the people that arrived both in May of 1607 and in the first resupply in January 1608. This was created by Captain John Smith, and it includes the occupation of the men that arrived in both the first two arrivals. Taking a look at the note at the bottom of the document, it says, note, a gentleman was a person of wealth who was not used to working with his hands. In our discussion already of Jamestown, we've learned about Captain John Smith and his problems with the men that he repeatedly had to tell if they did not work, they would not eat. This would be the man, the type of man that Smith would be talking to. A gentleman was a person of wealth who was not used to doing manual labor. And there were 47 in the first group of settlers that came to Jamestown. Bear in mind that 47 of 110 that came, almost half of them, a little less than half of them, were men that were not used to doing things with their hands, who were independently wealthy or had inherited wealth and were really not used to doing things with their hands, or certainly not taking orders from Captain Smith. Some important content notes before we look at the questions. John Smith was born in England in 1580. He left home at the age of 16. He fought as a professional soldier in Hungary. He was enslaved in Turkey and returned to England in 1604 and helped in the planning of the Virginia Company, the company that funded the Jamestown settlement. Upon arrival on James Island, a sealed box produced his name as one of the colony's 7 council members. One of only 40 to survive the first summer, John Smith was saved by the 11-year-old Pocahontas in 1607 and served as Jamestown's virtual leader until his tough management style, going back to that quotation that we attribute to John Smith, he who does not work will not eat. That type of management style got him sent back to England in 1609. Smith never returned to Jamestown, although he did sail to Massachusetts in 1614, where he is credited with naming the region New England. John Smith died in 1631, so 24 years after he arrived at Jamestown in 1607, John Smith dies in 1631. The first settlers arrived on 3 ships: the Susan Conant, which included 71 passengers and crew; the Godspeed included 52 passengers and crew; and the tiny ship called Discovery, which included 20 passengers and crew. The voyage from the London docks on the Thames River to Virginia took the first settlers approximately 4 months. And we know something else of these first settlers. Many actually, and ironically, did not intend to settle. They signed up for a year or two, and also many were preoccupied with pearl and gold and eventually discovering a river route to China. So we use the word settlers in describing the people that came to Jamestown at first in 1607, but many of them did not intend on settling or staying there. The first settlers were instructed by the Virginia Company investors in London to grow wheat and other crops so as to be self-sufficient, but it was apparently not intended that Jamestown was to be a farming settlement. So they were instructed to grow food so they could be self-sufficient, so they wouldn't have to rely on others for their food. But Jamestown was not intended on being a farming settlement. Recent work also by archaeologists on James Island, have found artifacts like glass remnants that suggest more activity in cottage manufacturing than once thought. Cottage manufacturing is those type of occupations that people are involved with that are done out of their homes or out of their cottage. And if you find glass remains or glass remnants at Jamestown, that suggests that people were probably blowing and creating glass works in their homes or in their cottages. However, that was probably unlikely that the glass remnants was the work of the first arrivals, probably a group of settlers that arrived after the resupply ship in January of 1608. So in looking at the document C, you see the occupation and the number of people from each occupation that were on the first two groups that settled in May of 1607 and January of 1608. And looking down at the questions, also one other note underneath the bottom here, boys, B-O-Y-E-S, boys, as you see them here, were considered young servants. Boys, young servants. Notice that all of the arrivals, both in January, of May of 1607 and of January 1608, all the first arrivals happen to be men. Boys is a term to describe a young male servant. So looking at the types of occupations that arrived, you've got a varying number. You've got gentlemen, which we've defined. You've got laborers. Laborers might be somebody who worked with their hands on any number of endeavors. You had coopers, people who made barrels, carpenters, you had a blacksmith, you had a sailor, you had a barber, a bricklayer, a mason in the first group, a tailor, a drummer, you had a preacher, which would not be uncommon for a new group having a Christian preacher with them, and also you had a surgeon who would be most needed if people came down with sickness or injuries. So looking at the questions, okay, question 1 under document C, again, I state this a lot, and you guys probably hear this in your sleep when we work on mini-Qs, but the first place that you're going to look when answering a question following a document is going to be in the document. Very good. How many settlers arrived in May 1607 and in 1608? So they're really asking you two questions here. How many settlers arrived in May 1607 and in 1608? And how many had known occupations? Okay, so we're really answering 4 questions for question 1. How many arrived in 1607 and 1608? And how many of each of the arrivals had known occupations? This second portion here will require you guys to do some math. The number's not going to jump right out at you. You have to do a little math in looking at the document. Question 2 asks, how many of the settlers from either group were female? Why do you suppose this was the case? Okay, look at the document, answer the question. What is a gentleman? Question 3. Approximately what percentage of this first group of settlers were gentlemen? So what you need to do to figure that out is you have to know, 1, what a gentleman was. And if you look at the note up there, and if you remember back to the early portion of this screencast, I defined a gentleman for you. What percentage of this first group of settlers were gentlemen? So you're going to have to look at the number of gentlemen that were included. You had 47 in the first group. You had 28 in the second group. So that's a total of 75. To find out the percentage of gentlemen in the first groups there, you have to do a little math. I am not going to tell you the answer. You guys will need to figure that out on your own. Please write in complete sentences. Question number 4, finally, of the 110 settlers who arrived in 1607 in May, nearly 70 were dead by December. Is there anything in the ship's list that helps explain why? Again, this question is asking you to look at the list of occupations that came with that first group and explain why 70 of these men that arrived in 1607 in May would have been dead by December. One thing that might help you answer question 4 And I don't want to give you too much of a hint, but what occupations are missing from this list of arrivals in May of 1607? That might be a hint as to what explains why nearly 70 men died in the first 7 months of the settlement.